Good morning, Las Vegas. It's Zandra Pollard with It's Where I Am. We're talking about psychotic behaviors. Today, my guest is Dr. Jacobs, Vice President of NAMI here in Las Vegas. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Jacobs.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've been trying to get you on for a couple of months now, so I'm so glad that you were able to come in last minute today. So I thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about psychotic behaviors with all of the recent occurrences on the news. There's something going on in the brains of these young men. Give us a rundown of what psychotic is.
Yes. So psychotic in the mental health world means there's a break with reality. So when somebody is experiencing, psychotic behavior or experiencing a psychosis or a psychotic episode, you might hear, there usually is a break with reality. So a lot of times that individual has difficulty differentiating between what's real and what's not real. And so, with psychotic episodes, they can look differently. They could be, presented differently depending on what the actual psychosis is. The person who's also exhibiting them as well. So there's a lot of different factors there as well.
Okay, so with psychotic behavior, that's linked to like schizophrenia. Is that correct?
Yeah. So schizophrenia is considered a psychotic disorder. Yes.
And then, so if someone is having a psychotic episode, they are distant from reality for like an extended period of time, right?
It depends. It depends on what's going on with that person, with that individual's brain, the extent of their presenting issue, the extent of their disorder or diagnosis. So there are variables that can be at play that can determine the length of a person's psychotic break, psychotic episode. For a lot of individuals, it is a long-term situation. I have a first cousin who was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and he was diagnosed at the age of about 20. And he's 42 now. So he's had it for the majority of his life, or at least half of his life, and he's likely going to have it for the rest of his life and have to be on medication as a result.
Wow. So as I understand, because I did mention schizophrenia, but also personality disorder is connected to psychosis. Is that correct?
Yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of individuals that have that are diagnosed with a psychotic disorder and do not have a personality disorder. And then there are some individuals that are diagnosed with a psychotic disorder and do have a personality disorder. So I would say that they're not, from what research says, they're not linked to each other. Most individuals that have a personality disorder do not have a psychotic disorder, but can experience psychosis as a result of their personality disorder and the trauma that maybe they have endured as a result of that.
So for me, all of this is so very confusing, because it sounds to me that anyone can have a psychotic episode and act a fool. What would someone like me or your average person, how would we be able to protect ourselves not knowing someone's psychiatric history?
Well, for one thing, I'll say, and obviously, we have to, be mindful and also be careful in terms of, the language and the labels that we use, right? And so I would say that, I wouldn't say that anybody can have a psychotic disorder, because I mean, there's so many different variables that are in play, but to know that sometimes a psychosis or psychotic episode can be brought on by an event. It could be say somebody using drugs or a certain type of drug, and that person having a reaction to that drug, right? So there's different ways that somebody can develop a psychotic disorder or have a psychotic episode, if you will. But in terms of just today's society and just kind of the things that are going on, I mean, yes, there's many layers when it comes to mental health. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fragmentation to mental health, and there's still a lot of unknowns, especially when it comes to some of our psychotic disorders. For instance, schizophrenia. I mean, there's still a lot of unknowns as when it comes to schizophrenia. There's a lot of research that has been geared towards figuring out, schizophrenia. I will say that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's all like on a spectrum, right? Like all of these disorders, it's not just a definite yes or no. It's all like a spectrum, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, not at all. No, no, no.
Because I'm getting so frustrated looking at the news and hearing about all of these things are happening. I mean, I know here locally in Las Vegas, there was an episode at UMC. Did you know anything about that?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us what happened at UMC.
Just the only thing I know is based upon just what the media reported. So obviously, I don't know like the ins and outs of what happened. Just that at UMC, on the psychiatric ward there, individual somehow got a hold of a knife and stabbed several people, and one of the individuals that he stabbed ended up dying as a result of that incident. So it was a very unfortunate situation. And one of the things I want people to know too, that, that the most people that have mental health or struggle with mental health are not violent. I think sometimes, the way the media, depicts, mental health on television. A lot of times it may on the surface look like, okay, why is there this or why is there this connection to mental health and violence? And I want people to know that most people that are that suffer from mental health or have mental health conditions are not violent, and so I think that's an important distinction to make. But unfortunately, for some individuals, some individuals that do have mental health conditions, can be violent, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up because that is absolutely true. I think I've been watching too much news, which is isn't it connected to like depression and anxiety if you're watching like too much news?
For me, I watch a lot of news, and for me, it's more or less just I want to be informed of what's going on. I think a lot of times, my position, a lot of the work that I do in the community, I think I have to be on top of what's going on, not only in the community on a local level, but also on a national level. So for me, it's imperative that I am listening and hear and receive as much information as possible.
Hey, and speaking of your position here, why don't you tell us more about your practice, what you do, and also the organization that you are connected to?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So 2 years ago, I opened up my own private practice. Dr. Sheldon A. Jacobs Counseling Services, and it was one of the reasons why I did that was because of the pandemic. I was receiving a lot of calls for people in the community that were needing extra help and support, and so I wanted to build a connect and reach those individuals. And so that was my main reason for opening up my own private practice at that time. I'm also the vice president of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, short for NAMI, Southern Nevada chapter. And recently, I guess you're not aware of this, but just recently I was elected the first Nevadan to be elected to the National NAMI board. So it'd be great. So it'd be great to kind of have a seat at the table for our state. So definitely excited about that.
Oh, awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Reminds me, because you're so busy, because I tried to send you a client and you're just absolutely booked. So tell us, what do people do if they need services and they cannot find services? What should they do? What should I, because a lot of times people call me looking to, find someone to get help. What do I tell them?
I think it's a very it's a good question. It's an important question because you're right. A lot of people do not know how to access help or support, especially when it comes to like finding a therapist. And so one of the first things I tell people is to check out the back of the insurance card. For the folks that have like private insurance, especially, there's usually like a referral number on the back of that insurance card.
Okay.
Call that number,
Okay.
to see about accessing the providers. And sometimes, unfortunately, with finding a good therapist, it's kind of like trying to find a good barber or find a good hairstylist. Sometimes it's a process, so you have to kind of keep trying. Sometimes word of mouth is also a good way, but a lot of times with insurance, people may have different insurances, and so I think it's important just to first go through your own insurance and to see what providers are available. Call those providers, and sometimes I tell people all the time, interview the therapist. So it's not about them interviewing you; it's about you interviewing your potential therapist, just to
Right.
see if it's a good fit, see if the personality meshes with your personality. So that's very important. Another good resource is Psychology Today, which is an online resource. People can go on, and they can get a list of providers that has their specialties listed, as well as a lot of times the insurances that they accept are also listed on there. So that's another great resource list. And then the third one I would say is Nevada 211, or just 211.
Okay.
You can call it, you can text it, you can Google it, but Nevada 211 has up to date resources. So if there's somebody looking for like a group, like a grief and loss group, or somebody looking for individual therapist for individual counseling or therapy, I mean that's another great resource to use.
Okay. So if you are having issues with finding a therapist, you can go to psychologytoday.com or 211. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So with that being said, what if you're not sure you need help, you don't realize that you need help, and someone needs to find help for you? So let's say I have a friend who doesn't realize that they are grieving to an extent where it's kind of like not normal. And I feel like they need, a support group or to see a professional, whether that's grieving, whether that's they're displaying some type of mental illness that I think maybe needs to be, assessed. How would I then approach that person to let them know, I think, you should look to a professional?
That's a loaded question. It's a good
Yeah,
question
but
though.
you don't want to get cursed out, you
Right.
know?
Well, if it's a friend, I mean, I think, obviously the first thing I would always kind of, lean towards is you have a relationship with that person. So with that relationship, the hope is that that will kind of guide you through having that relationship. And sometimes I think it starts with just having a conversation. I'm saying, I've noticed that you've been struggling for some time now, and I feel like it's best that you need additional support, uh, more professional support, if you will. I think kind of just having that conversation, and some depending on your friend, the friend may be in denial about what's going on with them. They may not have the awareness in terms of what's going on with them, and that's a very real thing, and that's okay. But I think just kind of softening the blow a little bit and just having the conversation, maybe indicating why you think that they may need additional support and help. So start there versus just saying, you need to see a therapist right off the bat. I think that conversation may not go, go the way you intend it to. So I think it's very, very important just to have a normal conversation about, why you think that they may need additional support, and assure them that, it's okay to not be okay. Right. It's we all struggle with mental health on some level. And it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not seek the help and support that you need and deserve. And so it's important that you just normalize it as much as possible. I think that's the thing is, obviously with mental health, there's a stigma. And I think that, we're trying to do all we can to chip away at that stigma, and to normalize mental health as much as possible so that more people don't feel ashamed to get the help that they need and deserve. But I think that it starts with just having that conversation. It starts with just normalizing as much as possible and letting that person know that a lot of people are struggling. You're not the only one, and it's okay to seek the help.
Do you think it's a good idea to keep asking questions and kind of let them say it for themselves?
You know what? I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
I think a lot of times you have to kind of utilize that that friend radar that you have in your gut,
Okay.
and so let your gut kind of guide you. But I think it's important that you're in tune with your friend. Because one friend you may be able to have that conversation with. Another friend you may not be able to have it the same way, right? You may have to kind of remix it a little bit. So
Sure.
I think it's important just how you kind of the approach, how you deliver it. I think it's very important. But yeah, I think again, it depends on the person. I think sometimes also what I've learned to be helpful is when you are maybe presenting somebody with something, sometimes it's good to have information to kind of support or to back up what you're presenting with.
Okay.
So for instance, if you're saying if it is a friend that's struggling with grief and loss, maybe have some information about grief and loss, what that looks like. When does it become problematic or an issue? So that's important.
Right. Yeah, because I have a friend who's still crying about somebody, and it's been like 25 years now. So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, and grief is one of those tough things because grief is for one thing we all grieve differently, right?
Right.
One thing I've learned just in my clinical experience is that people grieve very differently, and it sometimes for some folks it doesn't start until like months or years later after the person
Okay.
has passed or after the loss has occurred. For some people, it's more immediate, and it can become more of a pervasive sort of situation for them. So it really just depends on the person, but one thing is I will say is if somebody's functioning is becoming impacted, so if they're grieving to the point where and this is going on, years on end, and it's really impacting their functioning, then that might be a sign that something more on the line is going on. That they may be experiencing maybe some form of depression, that they may need more support and professional help, if you will. So it just really depends.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Mhm.
So with you being so busy and all, um, are you planning on expanding your practice and having some more folks there, or what are you going to do about that?
Right now, probably not. I think down the road, because I do, like you said, I have a lot of things going on, and
Yes.
so so don't want to burn out in one area. And so for me, I think my biggest the one area that I get the most excited about is the advocacy piece. I like kind of being boots on the ground, advocating for folks, really kind of spreading that mission on normalizing mental health, especially in communities of color in particular, because of the stigma.
Mhm.
So a lot of my work, a lot of my passion kind of stems from that. I think if we're able to kind of really address that stigma issue, that more people will seek the help and the support that they need. But until we do that, it's going to be an uphill battle. And one of the things I will say is, there's a lot of obviously positive things happening in mental health right now. We have a lot of people with platforms, celebrities, athletes coming out and talking about mental health,
Yeah.
which has been great. But the other thing I want to add is uh, the new crisis number, the new 988 number,
Oh, tell us about that. I don't know
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so the new crisis number, so the number is 988. So it's so anybody experiencing a mental health or a substance abuse related crisis, they can, instead of dialing 911, they can dial 988. The number is going to go live starting July 16th of this year, so in a week and a half. And I'm excited because folks that call that number will have a professional on the other end, a mental health professional that will be taking the call or taking these calls. So if somebody's in a true crisis, instead of having a law enforcement officer or somebody from law enforcement responding to that call, will be a mental health related professional responding to that call. And so it's kind of twofold in terms of, for one, it will divert folks from going into the justice system, because a lot of times, unfortunately, when people are having like a mental health crisis, that sometimes they end up in the justice system, because of that crisis, because that crisis, tends to escalate. Because for some folks, when they see a law enforcement official responding to a call, for some folks, it becomes a trigger, and that situation can escalate. And so, in all due respect to our law enforcement officials, they do, I think, a remarkable job, but they don't have the training, to deal with folks that are in crises. And so, so that's one positive. The other positive is, folks will hopefully who need a psychiatric response, meaning needing to go to an acute psychiatric hospital. A lot of times they'll go directly. The hope is with this number that they will be able to go directly to a psychiatric hospital versus having to wait in an emergency room where they become further traumatized. And so I think that this number will really help folks get the help that they need and deserve, and then also. For some folks may just need to talk through a crisis, right? So having a mental health professional be able to talk through that crisis with that individual, I think that will be very important. So I'm very excited about the new crisis number.
Well, I am too, because, when I started It's Where I Am almost 3 years ago, one of my very first shows, I think it was the second one, this was in, what is it called? In the pilot of trying out the mental health professional doing the ride along in the 911, for the 911 calls. So I love how this has progressed to its own number. Now, is this number, the 988, is that just locally here in Las Vegas, or is that national?
It'll be national. So
nice.
Yes, it'll be national. And so each state will have call centers set up throughout the state.
Okay.
And so it's a 24/7 number. So people can call the number in the middle of the night, mornings, weekends, any time. It's somebody will be able to answer that call. And the other great thing is, with some of the money that the governor has signed off on. There's going to be more crisis stabilization centers that are going to be set up in some of our psychiatric hospitals. So which will be beneficial, because again, instead of folks going to the emergency room when they're experiencing a mental health or substance abuse related crisis, they can go directly to a psychiatric hospital or a crisis stabilization center and to get that support and that help right away versus having to wait for it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for giving us that information. Now, before I let you go, I have to say what I do appreciate and love about you is that, sometimes women, I can relate it in this way. Women will say, oh, well, she doesn't have kids, so she couldn't possibly understand what I'm going through, right? So same with you. Not that you, I don't know anything about your psychological background, personally, mentally, but I know that you experienced with what homelessness is like, and you wrote a book about it. And so I'd like for you to talk about that book briefly and where people can find it so that they can learn more about you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that plug. So yes, several years ago, I went undercover as a homeless man here in downtown Las Vegas to raise awareness for mental health and for homelessness. And that experience turned into a book. So I wrote the book in September of 2020. The name of the book is called 48, an experiential memoir on homelessness. And you can purchase it anywhere through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any online,
Barnes and Nobles?
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. So, feel free to.
My signed copy in the mail.
Absolutely. So, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, you heard it here from Dr. Jacobs, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to It's Where I Am. I'm here every second Saturday of the month. I also have a new spin-off show called I'm Over Here. Our second show will air this July 31st, Sunday, July 31st at 7:30 a.m. It's a show on health food and wellness services. We'll be discussing the vagina and keeping it well. So I hope you tune in. So I just want to thank you all, my 91.5 Jazz and More listeners, for tuning in, and we'll see you next month, second Saturday of the month at 8:30 a.m. Bye.